And so I was just at the lowest point. At that point in time, I was like, well, I guess I'm just done, with Christianity. I'm done with God, because if this is what the people that I respect the most believe, then I don't know what to believe. I don't know what's true about anything they've said. It was just bad. I didn't know what I could keep and what I could throw away. At that point in time, I just threw the baby out with the bathwater. I was like, I don't know if I believe any of this now.
This is Why I Stay, a show about faithfulness in the face of judgment, confusion, and hurt. Lecrae has been in the hip-hop game for more than 15 years. He's won 2 Grammys and 9 Dove Awards. He's had a lot of success within American evangelicalism, but when he started to talk about his experiences as a black man in America, the very people that had loved him began to hurl accusations and hatred in his direction. It was enough for him to doubt everything about his faith, nearly getting divorced, and he even had struggles with addiction. But Lecrae has come through all of those experiences stronger, and he's even more dedicated to the gospel now. I sat down with Lecrae to understand how he was able to overcome the judgment and lies of the Christian community, and in that process, how he discovered an even more meaningful faith. So you are famous for being part of Christian hip hop. Like you said, you've done a lot of other things, and we will talk about all of that. But also, I want to talk a lot about your experience within church. So I want to dive in a little bit deeper into what your life was like growing up. Where did you go to church? Who did you know that was religious? All those kinds of little background things.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in church. My grandmother was a devout Christian. She became a Christian in her 40s, mid-40s. So it wasn't as if my aunts, uncles, mom grew up in church. They grew up seeing her transition. So some took to it, some didn't. And my mom was a little bit adverse to it just because kind of the denomination or the particular sect of church that she grew up in was very, very legalistic, meaning like they couldn't wear pants, they couldn't wear makeup. And so she took that as like, I don't want you growing up in this. So she raised me kind of like a free thinker. It was more about education and library and books and culture and thinking about the world in general. And that's how my aunt who was close to her, my Aunt Teresa, she would send me postcards from Tokyo and different places in Africa. So I grew up thinking that Christianity was very closed-minded. Church was a closed-minded kind of place that was very rigid.
So I assume it was black church that your grandma was going to.
Yeah.
Did you have any perception of white church? So like, was it just, the guys on TV asking for money, or was it not even that?
No, that's funny. I grew up pretty culturally segregated. Mm-hmm. So even though there may have been white people around me, it wasn't like a culture or a context that I existed in. So pretty much everything about my existence was black up until my last couple of years of high school, where we moved and it was a way more diverse school situation. But even in that school, I just hung out with the black kids. Mm-hmm. So as it pertained to church, my mom grew up in the civil rights era. She was raised by the Black Panthers, so she was very pro-black. And so the idea of a white man telling us what to do and how to understand our Bible would have been whoa, no. We grew up this is not going to happen. So I didn't have any context for white church or white anything. I mean, I wouldn't have explored that space had it not been for college and hearing white pastors come teach at our black Bible study.
All right, so you're in college. Why'd you go to Bible study? Was it a girl?
Well, yes, but yes, it was, but not in the way you would think. So in high school, when I was a sophomore, I took a senior to her senior prom. Mm-hmm. So she went on to college, and when I got to college as a freshman, of course, she's already a junior at that point in time. And so she had been going to Bible study. She was a Christian, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, welcome to school. You gotta go to this Bible study. It's so good." And me, I'm a free thinker, so I'm like, I'll try anything once. Mm-hmm. So I knew her. She invited me. Wasn't to date her, but it was just a familiar face. I didn't know anybody on campus, mm-hmm. So I said, "Sure, I'll go." And I wandered into that Bible study. And yeah, I just went in there and. I thought I knew a lot about the Bible because of my grandmother. But then when I got in there, I was like, I don't know any of this. Mm. And I think I was embarrassed a little bit. And it's just the desire to know and to be intelligent. And I hated, when they would ask questions and I didn't have answers, I hated that feeling of embarrassment. So I was like, I'm going to keep going to this so I can learn this stuff and be versed in this whole stuff that they're talking about.
Yeah. So you weren't driven by like spirituality. It's more about knowledge in the beginning there.
Definitely knowledge. It was definitely knowledge. I was a chameleon. So any kind of setting you put me in, I want to be great at it. If anybody, does Enneagrams, I know there's all kind of different spooky stuff about it, but I'm a 3. Okay. And, we want to be seen. We want to be the one, the Neo in the Matrix. So, when we were in Bible study and they're talking about David, I'm like, why does everybody know this and I don't? I feel stupid. You know what I mean? So it's like, I got to learn this stuff.
Yeah. When did it switch from knowledge to faith?
Well, we went to they all were saying, hey, we're going to this conference. The conference was in Atlanta. Of course, I wanted to travel. Never been to Atlanta. So I was excited to go to Atlanta, for African Americans. It's like, all the historically Black colleges, Martin Luther King. It's like, oh man, this is a great place. And then of course there's the fun side of it with like all the parties and the Freaknik. It was like this big picnic for African American college students. And of course I go to the conference and just seeing all these African American college students, I'm just like, yo, this is crazy. It was called the Impact Conference. And Impact was like the wing of Campus Crusade for Christ. That was the Black wing, African American wing of Campus Crusade for Christ. So I didn't know that young people loved Jesus or went to church. I thought Christianity was grandma's religion. So I thought it was peppermints and rules and long skirts. And I'm seeing braids and dances and cheers and rap music and clothes that look fresh and people. And, it was like cool. I had never seen people from different cities. So I never seen people from Philadelphia before. So it was like only on television. I'd never seen people from Miami or, it was like, wow, you guys are from Wisconsin. You guys are, and that was so amazing to me. I was just blown away by it. And they all loved God. So I think that was like my introduction. It was as if God said, I can meet you where you are and you don't have to come to this like religious environment. That was really probably impactful, and that turned the wheels of my spiritual spidey senses. And of course, at that conference, I heard the gospel presentation, and that was where my conversion experience happened.
During that time, what was going on with you as far as contemplating race, understanding race? You said about that time, a little bit earlier, you started coming in contact with white culture more often. And what kind of wrestling did that cause for you?
Yeah, I was pretty content in Blackness, in my Black culture, my Black world. I didn't venture out. I didn't listen to much music outside of Black culture. I didn't watch movies outside of Black culture. I didn't think any two ways about white people. I just was like, I don't know, they're in their world, I'm in my world. I don't really want to engage with y'all, and I'm fine. I'll stay where I'm at, you stay where you're at, and we'll just be where we are. But I think that I felt like I was interested in like being, it's like the threeness. Like I don't want to miss out. If there's something I'm missing, let me know what I'm missing. And some of the people who were leading Bible studies were quoting authors and stuff. And I was like, yo, who are these authors? I never heard of them before. So then I would start reading their books or skimming through their books. And then I was like, oh, shoot, like this is actually very intellectual. And that appealed to me. So I was very attracted by the intellectual side of Christianity, which was mostly white men.
Yeah. Did you know that at the time that it was mostly white men, or was it just a name on a book?
It was just a name on a book, but it was like subconscious, or, you weren't really paying attention to the fact that it's like, oh, you're just consuming a lot of white men's thoughts. Right. You weren't thinking about that. You just were reading the books because they appealed to your intellect. And I didn't realize that I was also reading their culture into my faith. I didn't catch that either. So I was just reading the books. And so their perspectives became my perspectives. And then little by little, you begin to frown on Black pastors and theologians because they were more heart and hands. When I say heart and hands, it means like emotion and service and less head. And I was like, man, why aren't y'all thinking about this? And that's wrong. And why are you saying it like that? That doesn't make sense. And so I began to have this disdain and kind of prejudice toward Black teachers. So, you start thinking that the white man's ice is colder and their water's wetter, and you don't even realize it. So that attitude just starts to permeate everything that you you do. And so now you want to hear these pastors and you want to go to these conferences and go to these churches, and only people there are white people. So of course you should just start assimilating. But I knew not to like give up myself. It wasn't like I was wearing Dockers and boat shoes and button ups. I was still me, but because I just was raised that way, but I still wanted to understand that space.
What's going on with your identity at that point? Like you kind of touched on it, you talked about how you started looking down on black pastors a little bit. And what did that do to you internally that maybe you didn't know at the time, but you can look back and see it now?
I think it subconsciously made me feel like white people were smarter. White people they had more to offer, and that it's best that I attune myself to them versus like, all right, let me change the way I talk around them. And I'm not thinking like, well, they never changed the way they talk when they're around me. Why would I change the way I talk when I'm around them? Or, let's talk about the movies and let's watch the stuff that they watch. I never watched The Office before, but that's all they talk about. So let me start watching The Office. You just little by little start adjusting yourself more toward them. And then they started to become my heroes, and I just would embrace things that were probably less culturally black, but I didn't think about it like that because I thought I was just adopting Christian culture.
Were there questions you had about race that, like, even if it was internally, that weren't being answered and weren't being even confronted?
Oh, yeah. I would always wonder, like, why we were slaves for 400 years and, what was God's plans there? And the answers I would get was like, well, praise God, because now African Americans know Jesus. And had they not been enslaved, then they wouldn't know Jesus. And, the curse of Ham, was that like a real thing? And I really legitimately got answers like, that was God cursing, African Americans or Africans at the time because of paganism. And now, look at the times we're in now. Now African Americans know Jesus and Africa knows Jesus. And so I really bought into those ideologies and those things. And so I did have questions, but there was always those kind of answers. Or God is sovereign. It's kind of like, all right, well, I guess God's sovereign. He's in control. So let it be. And I never looked at the disparity because I didn't expect it. I was doing well to me. I was making a living off of rap. And I mean, I wasn't killing it. I may have been making like, I don't know, maybe like 40 grand a year. But I was like, shoot, that's better than, going to college and having to get a real job. And so I was like, I wasn't complaining about the disparities as much because I didn't see them all. And I bought into these ideologies, John Piper's Don't Waste Your Life, the whole idea of like, man, don't just stack up money so you can retire, like give it all away. And so I bought into these ideologies, not realizing like, oh, y'all are coming from a place of having family, wealth and having opportunities, and I don't get those, but I'm still adopting this and I'm pushing this to my own community. So that was some of the tough stuff that I don't think I wrestled with in process.
So when did all these things start coming out? If I was to guess, I would say it was about 2013, 2014. Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Ferguson, all that stuff. Publicly, that's when it started. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I think I was like wanting to reach my community, and I was realizing that they weren't rocking with some of the leaders and teachers that I rocked with. So I knew that there was a gap, but it wasn't like clear like how big of a gap it was. And then obviously like when Michael Brown or Trayvon Martin was murdered, that was an issue for us in my community. And I'm assuming it's an issue for everybody, And then when you realize like, wait, why are none of these people why are none of the people I look up to, why aren't they talking about this, or why don't they care about this? And so I was like, maybe they don't know. So let me just talk about it. And then I talked about it and I was pushed back on vehemently. And I was like, what the heck? And that's when I realized, oh, we're different. We're really different.
Like how did you deal with that at first? Again, did you think it was to be ironic and anomaly, or was it an apocalypse of revealing of the truth to you? How did you first react to all that?
I was initially just hurt. I thought, you're the golden child. So it's kind of like, I can do no wrong. I know I'm not wrong. You know what I mean? Like I'm a golden child. Everybody loves me. Big 3 energy on the Enneagram. Right. And so first I was taken aback. Like, why aren't y'all agreeing with me? Like, what are you talking about? I said it right. I wrote it right. I know my facts are right. What am I missing here? And so then I was just hurt. Like, wow, wait a minute. These people are really like mean and hurtful and racist. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? That just blew me away because it's like, I didn't know. It's kind of like finding out, your parents are on drugs or something. You're like, what? Like, what is going on here? It's like really hurtful. So I got really kind of hopeless. There was a lot of other things happening in my life at the time that helped push that forward. I was very idealistic and I thought that Christians were serious. And, I went on a tour and everybody on this giant Christian tour was really, conniving, and there was all kinds of like dirty secrets going on. And I was like, this is crazy. So I was jaded, extremely jaded. I would listen to songs that I knew the Christian artists who wrote them, and I was like, their lifestyle doesn't match this song. And so this was only adding to that, so I was really just like, man, I'm done. This is trash. I don't want anything to do with it.
So about 2017, is that right? Is that the low point for you?
2016 for sure.
2016 was?
Yeah.
So what happened in there? Again, you had this public persona that's getting trashed all the time. I remember seeing it on Instagram. You'd like your July 4th post, but that was an extreme version. But almost every single thing you put up, you got trashed. Like you said, you have relationships with these other Christian artists. Yeah. You have relationship with these worldwide famous pastors. Driscoll. I know Piper. You had some relationship with, and all that starts crumbling around you. Where do you go? Where do you retreat to? What happens again in your heart, in your personal life there?
Well, yeah, I think in my mind, there was nowhere else to go because the world that I had built up, the ecosystem I had built around me was those individuals and the pastors and the theologians. They were the pinnacle. These were the high priests in my world. So to be let down by them meant there was nowhere to go. And so I was just at the lowest point. At that point in time, I was like, well, I guess I'm just done, with Christianity. I'm done with God, because if this is what the people that I respect the most believe, then I don't know what to believe. I don't know what's true about anything they've said. And so I really just kind of checked out and was like, God, I don't know. If you're real, then help me. But it was so bad, I couldn't even read the Bible because I would just hear their voices. It's like, I don't know. I don't trust my own brain. I don't know if I think this or this is what was embedded in my brain by these people who are so wrong about race and culture. It was just so damaging. I don't think I had the wherewithal to process it all. And I didn't have the community a lot of my Black friends, we're all in pain because we're all feeling the same thing, but none of us have the answers. It's like nobody's been here before. So we don't know what to do. You're seeing African Americans drop like flies from, evangelical churches. They're leaving or they're just abandoning the faith altogether. And you got like my friends, Jamar Tisby and Tyler Burns, they're starting whole new movements, and all of us are just like in disarray. So it was just bad. I didn't know what I could keep and what I could throw away. At that point in time, I just threw the baby out with the bathwater. I was like, I don't know if I believe any of this now.
I know you had, struggles with depression and addiction and all this other stuff in that same time. If people want to know more about that, go buy the book. But I want to know more about how, if there's nowhere else to appeal, the best pastors and preachers have failed you. Where'd you go? How are you where you are now, where you're still talking about Jesus?
Well, I had to run, and I ran from the idea of God and altogether. And, that's always a mixture, right? Like that's a mixture of hurt, pain, and then also like, well, shoot, if there's no God, then there's no rules. So I'm going to do what I want to do. And that type of, licentious, wild Mustang lifestyle is always, it just comes with its own consequences. So I think dealing with the consequences of that type of stuff, it's like, you can take Xanax for only so long before now you develop an addiction, and now you have withdrawals, and now you're having panic attacks, and now it's ruining your mental health. It's like, I mean, hey man, those are some of the consequences of like, jumping off the cliff like this. So I didn't know what morality was, because for me, I was like, well, where's morality created? I'm asking all these philosophical questions, like what's moral, what's not moral, what's good, what's not good. Why should I not rob a bank today?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what stops me? Is it just the consequences, or is there a higher moral authority that keeps me from doing it? And so that just kept raveling me down into a darker place, to where I was so low and so depressed. I was just like gasping for air. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I just need a voice outside of white men to hear from. And I don't want to hear from black men,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like they're just quoting white men,
Yeah.
you know, like an echo chamber in a lot of ways. And I don't even know what's good about the black men. I don't know what's good about anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had to get out of America. And I was blessed to have the resources to do that. So I just went to Egypt. And I think that's where God really met me. I wasn't looking for God. I was just like, hey, let me go check out pyramids and let me go hear voices I've never heard. And it's like you hear Egyptian historians tell you about the Nile River,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, oh, this is a real thing. This place is real. And I think the breaking point for me was my historian didn't know the Bible, was not a believer, was not a Christian, and was telling me about a Pharaoh who let all the slaves go.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, like Moses, the Hebrew slaves got let go. And she's like, I don't know your Moses. And I was like, Moses, the Bible. She's like, I don't know the Bible, but this Pharaoh let millions, hundreds of thousands of millions of slaves go, and he's not revered or talked about. And I was like, shut up. You know, so then it was kind of like, wait, this stuff could be real. And that's when I think the wheels kicked back in to like, all right, maybe some of your sadness and depression is like conviction, and you need to realign yourself with God. And so that helped me, but it was like I was only listening to like the obscure voices from other countries about Jesus. I wasn't trying to listen to any Western views, and that was very helpful.
So what would you say now Jesus is for you?
Man, Jesus is, he's the Messiah. You know, I had to go back and understand everything in its original Hebraic context. And he's the Messiah. He's the Messiah that everybody's been anticipating to change the state of the world through changing us. But he's not a nationalist. He doesn't see America as the greatest, as the center of, you know, the faith. You know, he's not blonde hair, blue eyes. And he is the great unifier. He takes the zealots and he takes the Herodians and just he takes all these people and puts them together. And I think that's what I learned to do with Christians. So I can listen to all of these pastors, white, black, Hispanic,
Mm-hmm.
and I can just see what is good, and I can take out of it. Now I know the bigger landscape,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have to just say, well, if he's right about this, he must be right about everything. Or if he's wrong about this, he must be wrong about everything. I can just kind of realize like some people have good things that I can piece together, and I'm okay with that now.
What's the gospel now to you, you know, versus what it was 10 years ago?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The gospel 10 years ago was this military mandate that if I didn't share, I was lesser than. And I would say today, the gospel is about bringing shalom. It's about bringing peace, right? And that's what Christ came to do. He came to bring peace. And so that's the good news. The good news is that the world is in chaos, and it's full of pain and sin and hatred and hurt. And Christ comes to bring peace. And I'm a picture of that. And so, you know, it's a message of the good news, right? And the good news is that Christ has come to bring peace. And so if you will trust him, then you can have peace. You can have peace in multiple different aspects. And so that's, to me, what's important. It's not just this mandate a checklist that I got to like share with somebody to feel better about myself. It's like, I care about this person and I want them to know peace. And so there's implications of the gospel, and then there's, you know, it's implicit and it's explicit, right? There's the implied aspects of it is because my life has changed, I can bring peace to you and I can love you and show you grace and mercy. And you can appreciate that and be like, man, I love this person and I want to know more about why this person is this way. And then there's the explicit, like, hey, let me tell you the story, this ancient story of Messiah who came to bring about this transformation and this peace. And so it's more of that to me than anything else.
For someone like me who grew up in white church, grew up in white spaces, how would you say that we start separating whiteness from Christianity in America? What would be a way for someone like me to start down that path?
Well, I would say, it's first just understanding the construct of white and black, right? That we live in a great book to read is Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, where you just can understand, like, this is a caste system that we live in. It's race is a construct, but caste is real.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a sense of how we see people based off of color. It's a color caste. And so one is it's understanding like the caste system that exists in America, but then two, it's understanding that as a person of European descent, you have a culture. America is more about the culture of white people than it is about America. Mm-hmm. Like some people say, well, what's your culture? I'm American. Hot dogs, baseball. I'm like, no, that's white. Mm-hmm. You just don't realize that. You know what I'm saying? Because in your mind, it's just American. You don't see the culture associated with it. And so I think it's understanding that you have a culture and that when you want people to move in the way you move, you're telling them to assimilate to your culture mm-hmm. because you think it's right. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, instead of trying to understand like, oh, there's subcultures and this is my culture. So when I wear a Atlanta Braves hat as a black man, it's probably not because I'm a fan. It matches my clothes or mm-hmm. I'm from Atlanta. I probably don't watch the Braves, but you have to be okay with understanding that you culturally would only wear the hat because you're a fan. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. But just knowing like that's my culture. Mm-hmm. And I think when you know you have a culture, then you can engage people differently. You can say, oh, guitars and Hillsong is not worship. Mm-hmm. That's a cultural form of worship. And so when I play this and people don't like it, it doesn't mean they don't like God. It means they don't like this cultural form. And so I think that's really big for my white brothers and sisters, just to understand that they exist in a culture.
What is the difference and how do you tell between influencing and enabling your local church?
Well, I think if we're thinking of church as an institution, you're never going to influence it mm-hmm. because it's an institution and it's got to run the way that it needs to run. It's got money to make. It's got bills to pay. And so church as an institution, I don't believe really can be influenced mm-hmm. Unless that influence helps with the bottom line. Because they're never going to move in the direction of what the Bible calls tzedakah or righteousness and generosity if it interferes with the institutional goals, right? Because that's just the way we are in the West. So why would I be honest about race and ethnicity if I know it's going to mess with my bottom line of my institution? Mm-hmm. Now, if we're talking about church as the community of believers, right? You can influence a community of believers because their goal is shepherding and care and sharpening one another and loving people outside of the community and serving. And so you don't have an institutional goal. You have the goal of doing just what you're supposed to do as the church, is shepherding, loving, caring, serving, building up people for the work of the kingdom. And so I would say that if your community is not willing to sacrifice some of those institutional goals, it cares more about the empire than the kingdom. But if they're willing to sacrifice those institutional goals for truth, then that's a healthy place. You know, I don't want to be in a place where it's about the empire and the institution. I want to be in a place where it's about the kingdom. And that doesn't require buildings and lights and guitars, and it doesn't require that. It requires leadership, shepherds, people, loving people and walking with people. And so there's a lot of ways that can be done. I mean, it could be done with buildings, lights, and guitars, but that in a lot of times becomes a hindrance and a weight for people to run in the way that they need to run.
Yeah. So, what kind of church are you going to now?
So I do this kind of a hybrid. So I do what's called a Torah club, which is where we get together, we study the scriptures in the ancient Hebraic context in a house. And then I also, I go to what you would call it, one of those Sunday institutions, where I know the pastor and he's open to hearing those things, but I'm okay with it as long as my family understands this Sunday situation is not our primary means of community and influence. This is, and this is going to sound trite, but it's almost like going to watch a movie that really helps inspire you to keep living for Christ. You know what I mean? It's like, let's go watch this production. My kids, on the other hand, they get integrated with other kids and there's programs for them. So I love that. But we know, like, it's our Torah club. It's our getting together with our local community, and it's a smaller group of people that where we do life with each other. And, you know, for us, it's like, man, we're that.
Yeah.
So, you know, a group of my friends, you know, we function as the leaders in that specific context.
Yeah. Where can people find you? You got stuff coming up. What's going on in professionally right now? What do people need to do? What do they need to know?
You know, obviously there's always music coming out, so go check all your music service providers. I'm always putting out music. Of course, there's a couple books out, but I think the biggest thing for me right now is, you know, it's people just understanding the work going on behind the scenes and just feeling like, man, I want to support an individual who's trying to build things outside of music. So if you see me post about something like that on social media, you know, it's because I'm sincere. The best thing to just follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You know, stay tuned in.
Why I Stay is a production of the Pathos Podcast Network, where we explore faith and gain understanding. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a 5-star review and go tell a friend to listen to it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Lecrae. I was super impressed with his willingness to be open and honest about the things that he's experienced over the last 15 years. If you want to know more detail about Lecrae's journey from being a darling of the young restless reform movement to being a leader in the cultural conversations about race and religion, check out Lecrae.com. You can get his books, music, and so much more there. This episode was edited and mastered by Clinton Battles, and it was produced and hosted by me, John Osborne.